And we are live.
Dan's still typing.
I'm still typing. Is the feed up, Tone?
It is.
Look at that. I might
That
go.
it is.
I might pull up StreamYard here in a second after I post this. Good afternoon, everybody. If you're tuning in, we're just getting settled in. We might hang out for just a few moments and wait for some more viewers to join us, whether you're tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I believe we're on YouTube Live. So if you want to go over to the YouTube, we'd love to see you there. Otherwise, throw us a question in the comments or just let us know you're watching. Let us know you're tuning back in. These are open gyms. We're doing these at least once or twice every month. We got a couple other sessions planned. Some of them are going to be live on social platforms like this. Others will be done like registration links. You can go watch a webinar, and we get a little bit more sometimes into the weeds, maybe a little bit more specific. But if you're looking for a place just to throw some ideas around, hear some of our perspective, we're not the end all be all. And we're in no way, shape, or form are we gurus when it comes to this kind of stuff, but we do have some repetitions and some experiences under our belt. I would say that myself, Vani, and Tamian are all practitioners of these things. And so while we don't get it right every single time, we've been doing stuff like this for a while. And so we have some thoughts on it. But we'd love to get you guys involved. So throw us a comment, throw us a question. We've got some questions from some folks in our network, some friends, some colleagues, people we work with. So we'll kind of kick things off like that today. But if you've got something that you're curious about or something you want to add to the conversation, feel free to do it below. Also, while you're around, it doesn't hurt to ever follow, subscribe, and like all of our channels or pages wherever you're watching, just so you continue to get some of that content. And frankly, it really helps us out. We appreciate it. So while we wait for a few more of you guys to tune in, we've got Antonio back here on the ones and twos.
Yep.
He's back there. There's no camera. There's no producer
camera
cam today, but he is. So he might be interjecting a little bit. Obviously, I'm joined by Megan. Megan, introduce yourself for the folks.
Hi. Yep. I'm Megan Jung. I'm the brand and marketing director for Thing 3D Solutions. I cannot just hear Manny in the
We
hallway.
got people down the hallway.
Good gravy.
Yep. If you're
Manny
tuning into this,
everything.
if you happen to know Manny Gutierrez, like we know Manny Gutierrez, go tell him we can hear him down the hall.
Yeah, tell him to shoosh.
Our team's having a good time down there. We actually have another event going on concurrently. If you're ever curious what Think 3D gets up to during the actual week, we have a lunch and learn going on for our LOT Espanol program, where we're taking our Leaders of Tomorrow programming and actually converting the entire experience into Spanish. So people from the Hispanic business community and all other communities that speak Spanish as their primary language can come enjoy that same content. We have our own Manny Gutierrez and Jesus Gonzalez facilitating that. So really exciting stuff. If you're interested in checking more of that out, you sure can at Bridging the Gap. Let me get back into my stream here, Tone, real quick. So Megan, today we're talking communication. We're talking effective communication primarily.
Mm-hmm.
We always use the qualifier effective, right? We want to be effective with our communication because we want it to work. Honestly, that's the bottom line. So let's get into a couple of questions. I know you've got some things already primed from some people that we had discussed with, let's see, I'll say a couple days ago. So I don't know. Let's kick things off. There's maybe a few people scattered tuning in, but we'll get to it. Also, I'm not sure if you guys are like us, but when we sit down for something, we have to have emotional support beverages.
So many
And I think we're all rocking at least 2 or 3 today. So if you know someone at work that also requires 2 or 3 beverages at any given time, tag them below.
Yeah, because how else are you going to get through the workday without your emotional support beverages?
We need something we need water. We need a caffeinated beverage.
Or two, if you're me.
Perhaps some sort of a juice or a probiotic.
Yeah, you know.
Gotta
get regular. You gotta get through your day, man.
This session today is not on hydration in the workplace, but it might as well. It should be.
Because I mean, if you're well hydrated, you're more willing to communicate with your coworkers.
I think there's something to that. Good work culture starts with proper hydration and nutrition, folks.
Coming from our water boy.
You heard it here first. Tone is our resident hydration specialist. He makes sure that we stay hydrated throughout the day. Which
we should really add that to the website.
We should.
Tone's title.
Yeah, because if you're like me, you drink coffee way too much and far too often throughout the day. So you need people like Tone to remind you to stay hydrated. So that's why we're doing this. So Megan, let's jump in with a couple of questions. We're talking about communication today. I'm sure we're going to get through these things. I'll let you throw them at me in whatever order.
Okay.
You seems right to you. So let's get going.
I think we'll just start off with what I believe is probably a good starting block and a good setup for this is what are some traits that are most important for a skilled communicator? So, like, what are those traits that a skilled communicator has, in your humble opinion, Daniel Card?
That's a good question. We talk a lot about the skill of articulation, and I think that's going to be one. And when I say the skill of articulation, I don't think I mean your lexicon, your vocabulary. Like, can you talk nice? Can you use big words? I don't necessarily mean that. What I mean is the ability to communicate what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and to try to seek clarity. So that would be one. If you're going to be a good communicator, I think the skill of articulation is super important, because that one's fairly universal. Also, as a caveat, if you're watching this and you watch anything that Think 3D does, specifically probably things that I do, or you join a session with me, you know I'm big on principles and techniques. There's a lot of different ways to lead a meeting. There's a lot of different ways to facilitate a training. There's a lot of different ways to do a one-on-one, but the principles still apply. And so I focus on the foundational principles. So when I'm looking at the traits of a good communicator, I think about it in terms of principles. How you go about it individually might be up to you. You might not be an amazing wordsmith. Maybe you prefer face-to-face communication versus written, and that's your strong suit. Love it. Maybe you're more of a small group person, right? And you like being in front of a small group, but once we get past 10, 15, 20 people, that's not your strength zone. I would always encourage you to go out and get into your out of your comfort zone a little bit, into some of those areas, and stretch yourself. But by and large, the principles of effective communicators, I think, need to be articulate. Be able to be clear, state your expectations clearly, and articulate yourself, what you're feeling, what you need, what you want. The second thing for me would be curious. I think good communicators are curious. And that curiosity has to come from a place of genuine and authentic empathy and humility. As far as, like, I might not have all the answers. I don't know all the answers. I'm going to need to truly seek out what this person's saying. Curiosity also comes in when we're navigating what can sometimes be like, I don't know, I'm sure we'll get into it because I'm sure it'll come up, but like tense communication, or like, I don't know, more difficult communication in the terms of, like, maybe it's difficult feedback. Maybe it's a critical conversation for somebody. The reality is, or disciplinary, right? For those of you guys who are managers, supervisors, things like that. But the reality is, with a lot of that communication, if you're not coming in at least with a baseline curiosity that's like authentically grounded in empathy and humility, you're going to be operating with maybe some suspicions, or you're going to be operating with assumptions about this person's intent. And the reality is, to be a really good communicator, curiosity is king. So you have to be curious. That's one of the best things that I could probably say. Other than that, you say traits, right? Most important traits. We talked about curiosity. I think a good confidence, right? A good healthy confidence. You don't have to be the flashiest, the most kind of out there as far as externally, or like extrovertedly confident person. But I think a good healthy confidence is important. And then I already mentioned curiosity, but I think in a way, empathy. I know curiosity is driven by empathy, but at a core, a real either baseline understanding that you, like, care, or at least an empathetic understanding of what somebody else might be going through, or what the human experience is like, or just a care for people, right? You need to care. And I think that comes from a genuinely empathetic place. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at leaders today, what do you think is the greatest communication challenge that leaders are facing today? And so that's on any leadership level. What's the hardest thing they got to deal with today?
Oof. We're talking specifically to work, or are we talking about in communities in general?
Well, let's start with work.
Yeah.
And then maybe branch out from there, because I think this could work in a lot of different avenues.
I'm curious. I know we got a few people watching across some platforms, so you guys tune in with some comments if you got thoughts on this. What's the greatest communication challenge for leaders today? I think one of the bigger challenges for leaders is always going to be the ability to lead oneself. So we're talking about communication. I think it starts with a lot of our internal communication. To be frank, I think that's a challenge. I think we could all be a little bit better with our self-narrative, our internal dialogue, internal monologue, if you will. So our own kind of internal communication. As far as externally to the people we lead, I think there is a growing disconnect and or like a lack of trust. Now, whether that's fueled by, like, what you see on the news, what you see in reports, like mainstream reports about workplace engagement and things like that. Who knows, right? Where that's sourced from. But in my opinion, again, I'm not claiming to be right on this. I'm not claiming to be wrong. I'm happy to have a conversation with whoever about it. Um, I think most people know it. I come from that position on it. I just think there's a general gap in the trust, or the, I'd say, the experience between like a frontline team member and somebody in management, or somebody at the director level in an organization. You look at anything like the big guys, Gallup, Arbinger Institute, anybody that does research lately, those are the two that I really like. So that's what I refer to a lot. But there's like a 70 some percent gap. I think it's like 73%. I'm not going to get the math right on that. So again, don't come for me. But hey, if you know the actual numbers, please throw them in the comments. But there's a large gap. It might even be pushing 80 now that I'm thinking of it. If somebody who's read the 2024 State of the Global Workforce Report from Gallup, you can actually dial that into regions and see some of this information. But there's a significant gap in trust. And it's like people just don't necessarily trust what folks say. And I think that's a big challenge, followed closely by safety, openness and safety. You have to let people know what's at stake. You have to let them know what's going on. And they need to know that no one's coming for you, right? Unless in reality, then it is a disciplinary conversation. Then we have to also let them know it's at stake. But I think leveling that, so people don't think we're holding cards, or people don't think there's an ulterior motive, just being honest, I think is a challenge.
Well, I think that bleeds into another question that we had gotten, which is how do you create a safe space for open communication and encourage that dialogue in a work setting?
Yeah, that's hard. One more time. How do you create a safe space for communication and encourage dialogue in a work setting? Is that the question?
Yep.
Okay. I think I clicked on it at the same time you did, Tone. I apologize.
Teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work. No, man, this is an interesting one. So in order to answer this, I might have to go back a couple things. If you've been in and around Think 3D Solutions, we do talk about openness and safety. Rebecca says accountability. That's a good one. I do think that's a hard one, Rebecca. I probably have to agree with you on that. I think accountability is super difficult. I think the reason accountability is difficult is because there's that breach in trust, though, and sometimes we're not able to level at the effectively, right, in the manner that we want to a lot of times. So I definitely hear that, because we hear a lot of the time with organizations we work with, there's an opportunity, or we want to get better at holding people accountable. And I think that is a universal gap. So I might have to walk my own comments back and agree with you, and add that to the top of my list, Rebecca. I would definitely agree. So back to the safe space thing, as far as open communication and encouraging dialogue. When we say safety, I feel like I should define what we mean.
1,000%.
Safety, in my experience, in my opinion, doesn't mean that there is a lack of accountability or lack of a requirement or a commitment on everyone's part to grow and get better and participate. Safety doesn't always mean a free pass. And I think that's what a lot of the times people get conflated. This is a safe space. Yes, a safe space is also, that's like the gym. When you go to the gymnasium, that's why we have open gym. That's why kind of like the whole title behind this is, it's built on safety. Safety means there is a soft place to land and no one intends you harm. Okay. When you go practice a sport, when you go practice a discipline, there's an understanding that somebody might get hurt. Okay. But a hurt is an outcome, meaning that's an impact. That's a thing that happened. Whereas harm is an intention. Harm is a targeted, intended act. And so I like to remind people, just at a baseline, when we talk about safety, what we really want is a soft place to land. Okay. We want a place where it's accountable, there's support, there's appropriate challenge, but at the same time, we're all in this together participating, because we're human beings and because things get messy. We don't always make decisions logically. Most of us don't. It's going to be in a situation where somebody's going to say something, somebody's going to do something, and you will get hurt. And it's okay that we use language like that at work. That hurt my feelings. That upset me. That made me sad. That made me confused. That made me feel small. That made me feel disrespected. We get to say things like that. It made me feel this, because as a human being, you get to have those outcomes. So one of the things, the baseline things we have to do is define what safety means. Safety is a soft place to land, right? We get to identify and articulate our hurts, right? But it also just means that we don't intend each other harm, and we have a really low tolerance, I would say a zero tolerance, on malicious intent, right? If there's malicious intent in the workplace or on a team, stamp it out, weed it out now. Just my opinion. As far as the safe spaces, those other things is repetition. It's going to take repetition. It's not easy. It's messy. It's going to feel odd. There's no secret sauce, as even on our team, just transparently internally, we try to be open and safe. And that means I have to walk back a lot of things that I say, or I have to talk to people and be like, hey, I came across this way in a meeting, and I was stressed out. I was really busy. I had other stuff on my mind. I didn't mean to come at you like that. I'm sorry. So I think one, define your safety, right? It's a soft place to land. Doesn't mean there's not going to be a challenge. Doesn't mean there's not going to be some of those moments. We understand that part of the process of jamming a bunch of people together in a room and making them work together for 40, 50 hours a week, like we're gonna have issues. And the other piece for me would be that get repetitions at it. It's going to be messy. But yeah, those are my thoughts, at least how to start it. One last tidbit, I would say encouraging dialogue within a work setting. This is going to take probably a different approach than you're used to, but you have to acknowledge and call out the elephant in the room if it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't open up a dialogue without anything sitting in the corners, without anything sitting in the closets. So folks, if you're sitting there and your organization had something happen 24 months ago, and this is a reality, well, we know this to be true. Actually, we have organizations that we work with of all over the country where there's like, oh, this happened 4 years ago. This happened 6 months ago. Sometimes it's like this happened 10 years ago, right before the pandemic, and it's still driving a wedge between people at the front line and at either, middle management level, senior leadership level, executive level, whatever it is. And the reality is you got to call out that elephant in the room. You got to be able to point to it and say, hey, do we all see this? Can we acknowledge this? We all understand this is making us feel some kind of way. Yep. Hey, can we work through it? Can we work around it? Right? Is that possible? Can we help? Can we navigate towards a solution together? So I think part of opening up safety and open dialogue is acknowledging those things. So it begins with acknowledgement. We have to let people know we see them. I see you. I see the impact this is having on you. This might be the most controversial part of this take. One other ingredient for safety is this is 360 degrees. So if you're sitting there as a frontline employee or as a supervisor, you're closer to the front line and you have a disdain or distrust or tension or any negative emotion really like held towards senior levels of management or the organization, right? The company, everyone likes to refer to the company. Well, they and the company, I don't know who the hell they are, but they're doing overlords. This, they're doing that. Yeah. The mysterious overlords are, and it's like, there's this sinister cabal of people in your organization that are somehow plotting against you. You know what I mean? Rather than kind of walk around with that assumption and act like that, go inquire, go ask, be like, hey, these actions made me feel X, Y, and Z. So my opinion on safety and open dialogue is that one, it has to come from the top, but everyone has to participate. And so the biggest thing for moving forward with openness and safety, we have to be able to let some of those things go in the past. So that might be like having a difficult conversation. That might be like, hey, I got to walk back a few things that I said and be like, hey, I was just making assumptions when I said this. So from the front line, it might look like that. We might have to change our perspective on some things. We might have to get curious, but openness and safety, I think, are done with intention. If you're curious about how that can look and how that should look, like honestly, shameless plug, give us a call. We do that. We sit down with groups of people. We have conversations just like this. We hear everybody out and we say, let's talk through it. Help me understand what's going on. Give me the history of it. Run it back for me. And we'll help you walk through some of these things. Is that going to be a solution? I don't know. Right. But the process is going to be a little bit easier. We're going to be able to work through some things in a different way. So as far as safetyness and open dialogue in there, try to find a good environment, try to find the right time, try to get buy-in, set the stakes, set the stage, and express what you're willing to give when you go into that. Like, hey, here's my expectation for this. Here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what I need from you guys. Can we make this happen? And make the request. And that's all you can do. If people aren't willing to go that, then you got to work with what you've got. So if they're not willing to completely open that up, you've got some other intentional work you got to do, whether that's build up relationships, build rapport, things like that.
Well, and I think, Dan, too, this actually, especially this part of this conversation really even feeds into like your interpersonal stuff, like with friends, with a partner, with whatever, where it's like, these are all really important things to like keep in mind while you're talking to people in general, like having difficult conversations. You don't want to have that at a coffee shop. You don't want, like, that's probably not the place for this.
No.
Like, so it's just like being mindful about these things, even in your day-to-day life of like, if I have to tell Tone some bad news, I'm probably not going to pick the busiest place physically possible. I'm going to pick a place where he and I both feel comfortable chatting with each other.
Yes. And you want to be mindful of those environments. Like we talk about it in training like this with people. If I were to zap you back right now to your childhood living room, you're going to have a reaction.
Mhm.
It might not be positive.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, good, bad, or different. Like it might not be positive. For a lot of us, it might be anxiety inducing, might be a little bit traumatic. Others, it might spark feelings of joy and sentiment and all the sorts of cool
Mhm.
stuff. And that's awesome. But the reason I bring that up for people is just to demonstrate the point that spaces hold energy, tension, things like that. I'm not getting wooey with it, right? But I'm just saying, like different rooms make you feel a certain kind of way. If you were to take me back to certain county buildings in California, going through courts, going through adoption, stuff like that, it's going to make me feel a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
Right. So like, be mindful of is the office the best place to have this conversation? Is the conference room the best place to have this conversation? Probably not. If it's super meaningful, if it's important, be intentional. Safety encompasses all of those things. Yeah, absolutely. Environments. And also, folks, like, if we can't start operating in our professional senses with a little bit more humanity, we're going to lose our effectiveness. I'm just going to get on a soapbox really quick. You can't cut off a part of your humanity to go to work, right? Like when you're at work, you can be professional, absolutely, but you're also a person. Things that people say and do impact you, and the things you do and say impact other people. So once we start understanding that there's a whole entire human being, 360 degrees, they have a life outside of this. They have people they love and care about. They have things they aspire to. They have things they're afraid of. Just understand what the hell you're actually doing when you're interacting with some of these people, and remember that. And that's going to be one of the first steps in building that curiosity, that empathy, that way we approach people differently that can help build safety over time.
Yeah.
Safety.
Gotta be safe.
Gotta
in
be
all
safe.
aspects of your life. Be safe. So I think that kind of bleeds into some good questions about how do you handle sensitive situations, and that might be around topics of race or concerns of that, or discomfort in the workforce, either due to sexuality, whatever it is. How do you handle that? How does somebody bring up that conversation if somebody approached you like, hey, Dan, so-and-so said this inappropriate thing to me? How do you do that? How do we go about having that conversation with that person and then bringing in the third party?
Oh, like the person that did it?
Oh yeah, you got it. We like gotta talk about the sensitive situation, but then how do you address it directly with potentially the person who is a problem?
Yeah, we got a couple folks coming in here. Hang on,
coming in hot.
It's Rebecca. Perfect. So here's my take on it, and because we're going to get into some HR stuff, right? Some more on like the technicalities of it, and that is going to be very dependent on the state you work in, the organization you work in, the type of work you do, and the specifics of what happened, who said it, in what context, right? Somebody in a leadership role communicating to somebody of, let's say a different ethnic background, right? They come from a different background than you do, or let's say it's a different gender, right, or different sexual orientation, and they say something that's inappropriate, or that can be received as advance because there's a power dynamic there. That's something where we're going to need to we're going to want to do more of a formal approach. Like when I talk to somebody, especially if that person really did feel extremely uncomfortable, go through the proper channels. Go find people you can trust. Go find people who are, professionally trained in all of the policies, procedures, regulations of your specific organization to go do that. Because every organization might be a little different, right? Especially not only from like a legal standpoint, but just from a culture standpoint, right? And you want to make sure that you can go to get the most effective, the most thorough response, and I would say solution to that problem, especially if it's recurring. Here's my take on that, though. So all that being said, disclaimer, frequency and impact. Not to say that there's any excuse for inappropriate behavior or comments or sensitive things like that, but frequency and impact. Was it something that somebody said is kind of a blunder, like in ignorance? Everyone stuck their foot in their mouth in their life. Maybe it was that. Sometimes we don't know. One of the best ways that I encourage people is to directly ask. So like, hey, what did you mean by that? Hey, you said this, it made me feel this kind of way. Was that your intent? And if you're not comfortable directly asking because there's a power dynamic or because you just don't want to deal with that person, right? I totally get that. Go talk to somebody either in leadership, right? An adjacent person in leadership or in human resources that has training in these kinds of conversations so they can sit all of you down, right? But my direct thing is to always ask.
Mhm.
I feel like that's where we get into a space where we talking about safety and confidence. Do you feel safe, right, to go ask or go inquire, especially when that happens? And I would have that conversation as soon as I can. Like somebody says something on, it's like, wait, what? What was that? Don't let that go. If you're comfortable having that conversation, again, timing, tact, delivery, you don't want to be super hostile because you want to add to the problem. But at the same time, ask, right? I'd be like, hey, what was up with that? Now, not everyone's comfortable doing that, right? Not everyone's confident doing that. And that's okay. That's where it comes in to approach somebody else. So bring in somebody from human resources, bring in somebody from leadership. Again, if we're going down that route of the sensitive situation, if the sensitive situation is specifically that somebody has said something that's made you feel uncomfortable, right? I think that was what kind of the context.
Yep.
Yeah. If that's the case, go talk with somebody else. Here's my thing on that. Impact versus intent, right? We talk about hurt versus harm. So be very intentional and very specific. When we go to address things, we use specific language. We use receipts if we can, copies of an email, screenshots, right? Transcripts, notes, dates, and times. We want to be as specific as possible. When you're dealing with something that was sensitive, when you're dealing with something like that, I want to let somebody know exactly what happened as much as I can, when it happened, and what was said specifically. Okay? Because it matters. If I tell you in a meeting that I need you guys to do more as a team. Hey, I need you to double down. I need you to kick it into high gear for the next 60 days. That's different than me saying you guys have not been doing enough, right? But all that it takes is for me to say, hey, for the next 60 days, I really want you guys to kick it into high gear. I know you've been doing a lot, right? Not to say you haven't been doing enough. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is I really need us to double down. Those are two very different messages. Now, if you were to go to somebody else and say, Dan told me I wasn't doing enough.
Mhm.
See what I'm saying? Right. So we're assuming in this instance, it's not related to anything that would be like under harassment, right? It has to do with any more of those issues, whether it's ethnicity, race, gender, identity, any of that stuff. Maybe we're just talking about a disagreement or an expectation, or somebody said something that bothered you. This is where it's important to be able to communicate exactly what someone said. And if someone's saying to you, hey, I need you guys to really double down, or I need you guys to speed this project up, if you interpret that as them saying you're not doing a good enough job, the unfortunate reality is that's an issue of your interpretation, especially if they said that thing.
Yep.
So it really kind of depends on the context. One, if you feel like something is unsafe, if you feel like something has been said or done with malicious intent, immediately go to leadership, somebody you can trust in leadership, or you feel like you've got a good relationship in leadership, or human resources. Depending on your organization, the size of it, the type of people in there, who it is. You might have a great human resources department. You might have one or two people that are stretched really thin. And this whole thing of needing to mediate and get into the weeds of an interpersonal conflict is not something they maybe feel equipped to do. Go find someone in leadership who might be able to do that. Otherwise, care and intention, real quick on those. So almost, she said it right there in the question, care and intention. This is a sensitive conversation. You need to be careful. You need to consider 360 degrees all the way around you. What's going on? And pause. This is where we talk about power, right? Like our coaching framework, pre-work comes into this. And a lot of pre-work has to do with just pausing right away. Certain schools of thought, folks, and it's like, I don't know, man, depending on who you go to. You go to like Dale Carnegie, you go to Crucial Conversations, you go through any DeJulius group or Arbinger, whatever, like Gallup, like you take different stuff, Hogan. Certain places are going to tell you address it as soon as possible. Other places are going to tell you wait 24 hours. The reality is there's not a secret timeline or formula to when. It's, do I feel ready? Like truly ready, mentally, emotionally. I physically have my stuff prepared. I'm ready for the conversation, but I'm ready here and I'm ready here. Those are two of those things. Also, is the person I'm needing to deal with ready? Do they have the capacity to have this conversation right now? There's not a timeline to that.
No. I think that leads into a good question about how do you handle difficult people? I myself, at a former job, have had to deal with a few difficult people. One in particular was a person in leadership who would send me emails if I didn't reply back fast enough and just say crickets. How does one deal with that, Daniel?
Oof.
Like now in hindsight, I can't do diddly about it. But in that moment, all I wanted to do was walk in his office and punch him in the face, which is not the answer. You don't do that. But how do you deal with somebody, though, that is just, you feel like purposely just trying to push your buttons, and you're like, okay, my friend.
Acknowledge it. I would acknowledge it and say something about it, talk about it. More often than not, that's, well, what do we call that when we're dealing with, like when we're talking about behavioral health, like when I've worked in that background, we call that attention seeking behavior, right? To a degree, especially if it's difficult. I don't know. Let's talk about that instance. Somebody messages me back, gives me a time frame, because that time frame does matter. Specifics matter, people, by the way. If you're ever tuning into these and you're like, why does Dan talk so much about like context and it depends? Trust me, I hate it depends answers as much as, if not more than the next guy. But a lot of things are not cut and dry. A lot of stuff exists in shades of gray areas, right? In these little, like, it's a nuance, it's a subtlety. And the same exact application of something across multiple scenarios is not exactly always the best answer. So that's why we ask. Give me like an example. Give me a timeline. You get
Sure.
email number one.
Email number one. Let's see. Generally speaking, it would happen because it's not a one-off situation that this happened. Let's say the first time I got an email about 7 a.m.
Okay.
So before coming into
Right
work,
before you get
the
into work.
email. Okay. See the email, go, okay, long list of questions. Like,
Yep.
okay, well, I have to work through that. I have to get some information, whatever. Go about my day. It's probably about 10 a.m. I get the crickets.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, well, I have meetings, I have whatever, give a girl some grace here.
Yeah.
And then literally it would be, if I wouldn't reply back after the first crickets, I'd get another crickets. And
no. Okay.
it's not even giving a girl 24 hours to process
so
and kind of work
within
through
24
it.
hours.
Yeah, sometimes it would be within 24 hours, but a lot of times it would be within a couple hours of not replying right away.
Yeah.
Or I would reply back with, hey, I'm working on this answer, whatever. And if I didn't come back then with an answer within a couple hours, crickets.
No, that's again, expectation versus reality, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we talk about the skill of articulation being important. If I send you a general email and I say, hey, can you get to this ASAP? As soon as possible. As soon as possible means, at least according to me and my team, this is priority one. Whatever you were working on, this now becomes the priority one. Whatever was currently in the queue is now priority two. This is priority one. So maybe I have an expectation of that. However, if you don't have a set timeline, if you didn't give this person a specific time to get back to you with what and when, you should have zero expectation that they get back to you on your time. If you need it, there's a better way to articulate outside of being passive aggressive, right? Or being cute. I would park that under cuteness, right? I'm trying to be cute, trying to be funny, to get what you need. And so I would just say that comes down to clearly articulated and mutually agreed upon expectations. If you and your team don't know what ASAP means altogether, well, I think it means this. Well, I think it means this. Great. We all have different experiences. We all have different backgrounds. We might come from a different op tempo than somebody else. All good. What do you mean when you say ASAP? So get clarity. Clarity and alignment ahead of time will generate that. Otherwise, what I would do, I would acknowledge that difficulty. And here's how this would sound. I get an email. I say, hey, I'm working on this. I'll get back to you. Or maybe let's say I get a second email. They double email me in a day, right? Ping, ping. Hey, I didn't hear back from you on this. Just want to make sure you got it. Which, you know what? It sounds like that's a high priority for them.
Yep.
Sounds like this is really important. In which case, I would let them know what's going on. Hey, Tim, I don't know. If your name's Tim, this isn't targeted at you.
It's targeted at you, Tim.
Whoa. That's not a way to create a safe environment. No, Tim, we're just giving you a hard time. So if there's whoever it is, right? Tim, Kevin, Bob, insert blank. Hey, Bob. Hey, Tim. It sounds like this is important. I've gotten 2 emails from you in the last couple of hours. You didn't attach some sort of a timeline, some sort of an urgency to this at the beginning, but based on this last email, it sounds like this is a high priority. In order for me to get to this, I have to drop all of these things and focus on this. I'm more than happy to do that. Are you okay with that? And I would let them know. Super happy to make this adjustment because it sounds like this is a high priority, right? So I want to address it in the immediacy. I want to let them know, one, I'm going to acknowledge the behavior. I'm going to acknowledge the thing, if I can. Secondly, I'm going to be as clear as I can and as open and again, articulate as I can with what I'm willing to do, what I can do, but what has to happen in order for me to do that.
Yep.
Because I want to demonstrate to them how I would like to be communicated with in the future. Right. So in the immediacy, that's all I can do. I'd let them know what I'm dealing with. If there's some sort of a difference in my priority list that has to happen, I'm going to let them know. I'm happy to make this happen for you. But here's the case. But let's be honest. Why do people behave passive aggressively? Tone, what do you think? Jump in on this. Why do you think people behave passive aggressively? Not looking for a right answer, just a answer.
I think people act passive aggressively just because they already know what they want in their heads, kind of thing.
Yep.
So like they kind of start to expect people to do it.
Mhm.
So then like when someone does something and you're like, oh, like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird, like, I think it just comes from the person is already passive aggressive enough where they might have some sort of internal issue of communicating something specifically.
You said something in the beginning there, an expectation where? In their head.
In their head,
Right?
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How good are our how effective are our expectations if they're in our head?
They're not very good because
They're not.
people don't read minds, Daniel.
They're not. So this is where I'd address it in the moment, because passive aggressive behavior, and here's a critical point, folks. People are not passive aggressive. So stop labeling people as toxic. Stop labeling people as passive aggressive. Stop labeling people as this stuff. People are people.
Mhm.
Behaviors can be a thing. A person cannot be passive aggressive. Their behavior can be passive aggressive. So one, stop labeling people as such. It dehumanizes them, not only in your eyes, but it makes it very, very difficult, especially if I've repeatedly labeled somebody like this, that they would want to interact with me. So one, I'm going to identify the thing in the immediacy. I'm going to say, hey, it sounds like this. Because what does that communicate to you when you get that message? Crickets, crickets, crickets. What does it communicate?
It's communicating that somebody's being a bit impatient and that I, to them, did not do the activity in a timely manner, regardless
sure.
of not getting a timeline.
100%.
It was,
Yep.
Yeah, it all of a sudden triggers to me, what you'd said.
So it
Well, I
communicates.
guess this was a larger priority than I assumed
And
it
that's okay.
was based upon
Yep.
what you said in that email.
Yep.
I assumed I had a little time to process, do my job, do the meetings I was supposed to do. Did not realize I had
Nope.
this was a 911, like drop everything,
And
red
so-
alert, get it done.
All we can do
Yeah.
is acknowledge that thing, acknowledge the reality of the action. Hey, it sounds like what you're communicating to me is it sounds like this is important to you. If it's a priority that's this high, I'm happy to make this work. Here's what's going to need to happen. Are you okay with that? And that's the big thing, is we want to be clear, and then we want to ask, does this work? Because what are we modeling? Acknowledgement. We're not assuming malicious intent, but we're telling them, this is, you've emailed me twice now, 3 times now in a day. I don't have an update for you yet. I'm happy to spend more time doing this. Although here's what I would need to do it, because my priority list looks like such. So as people, and I say as people in general, if you're tuning into this, if you're passing by, something we believe at Think 3 is that leadership's not just a position. And obviously that's kind of a mainstream conversation now. Sometimes you have a manager, director, an EVP, a president, whatever, right? Insert blank. But you need to lead vertically now. Right? So this is a leadership opportunity. Can I lead through my example? Can I lead through my influence? This is where empathy and articulation come into play. So dealing with difficult people, I would acknowledge it. That's a great example. Somebody's really having some, I would kind of park that under borderline obnoxious email behavior, especially if we don't have that kind of relationship. And obviously a couple hours to wait for an email is a little bit absurd, depending on the type of conversation.
Yeah.
If it's that high of a priority, folks, pick up the phone and call them.
Best part,
Right.
Dan, is could just walk out of the office and walked into my own.
Or pop in.
It's just like, hi.
Shoot you a message
we
on.
literally share a wall.
Yep, I'm going to shoot you a message on Teams, and I'm going to ask you on Teams, hey, do you have 10 minutes to talk about this project with me really quickly? So there's that. But as a general rule, I would acknowledge the behavior, right? And let somebody know. This can also be a tactic when you are leading people and you're doing something like a review or an evaluation, and that can be a tense moment. Acknowledge that tension, acknowledge that nervousness. Hey man, I don't like reviews either. It always feels super nervous. Here's the good news, right? No one's losing their job today, right? Or you're talking to somebody in that sense, they call you, because we've had this before. Sometimes a client calls, sometimes somebody calls, and it's a 5-alarm fire to them. And I want to acknowledge that. You seem really frantic, and that's okay. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. You seem like this really stresses you out. Let me help. This is also true of dealing with people in crisis. So when you're dealing with people who are going through a stressful time in your work, acknowledge that feeling, right? Verbalize it. Tell them that you see it. I see you. I see it. I see how that behavior is affecting you. And I get it, right? I might not fully understand what you're going through, but I get it. That being said, difficult people, acknowledge the behavior, establish clarity, right? Develop some alignment, and then set an expectation for moving forward. Moving forward means the next step. In order to get forward one step in whatever process, project, or conversation, here's what I need from you. Are you willing to do that? Because expectations need to be clearly stated and mutually agreed upon. So I would establish those two things. After that, after we've established that expectation, and if we're able to move beyond the immediate thing, then we can do an after action on what we need to happen in the future generally. But my thing would be to address that one specifically, handle that event specifically. And then after that, I would be able to, hey, do you have time to touch base? Do you have time to sit down next week? Can we do some sort of a one-on-one or a deep dive? I'm going to get you off site, or I'm going to find a place on site that's a little bit more secluded. You and I can talk, neutral ground potentially. So, it's not, not coming for you. I'm also not complaining. Speaking of safety and openness, when you call someone in for a meeting and you're going to bring HR or somebody else in leadership and you're not going to tell them, and now they walk into a 2-on-1, what do you automatically think they're going to do?
You are going to get fired. And
They're going to get their
tense
hackles up, right? They're going to get tense. They go into fight or flight. And what we know about fight or flight is good defense looks offensive. So we get snappy, we get short, we get passive aggressive. So just be mindful of that. As a general rule with difficult people, we address them directly. And again, this is that soft place to land. If you meet someone's negative energy with more negative energy, if you meet someone's snark with more snark, what do you think you're going to get in response?
You're going to keep getting leveled up.
Right? So handle it differently. I would just say acknowledge it directly. We absorb it. Hey, sounds like this is important to you. One quick caveat, and this will make a good soundbite, video team. More often than not, people in organizations who we would consider difficult or vocal or highly critical, it's oftentimes they care.
Mm-hmm.
Like the people that are the most consistently like, well, I don't like this. Can we change this? I don't understand this. And they're always raising their hand, giving you a hard time. Guess what? Get them in a role where they can be hyper analytical of something. Get them in a role where they can do that, because the reality is they care. The reality is they're passionate about this to a degree. And I would ask, hey, based on how vocal you are with feedback, it seems like you really care. I want to put you in a position where you can put that to good use. I never want to ask somebody to dim their shine. I never want to ask them to be less or be someone else. What I can ask them to do is to aim it. Aim it appropriately. Point it at something productive. Point it at something intentional. As far as the other thing, and I'll just add this before, I know we're getting lengthy with this answer, but difficult people, in my opinion, just always consider what it's like for them at home. We've all worked with them. We've all worked with somebody. It can be, man, it could be a great day. It could be the sun is shining. It's 66 this morning. It was about 60 degrees, right? You could walk by somebody walking into work and be like, hey, Bob, great day, beautiful day out, isn't it? Yeah. Winter will be here before you know it, though. Something like that, right? Like it's just that constant negativity, and everything's a battle. Everything's a thing. Everything's happening to them on purpose to make their life difficult. At least it's what it seems like. I have to stop and ask myself sometimes throughout the day when I'm interacting with people who have chronic negativity, what is their home life like? What happens at home? How happy are they? And that sort of assumption about someone's attitude turns into empathy. Mm-hmm. Because now I have a heart for the person that's being difficult. And so I think that's a through line, is just remember what might be informing that experience. Is this person, maybe this is the only thing that they can control in their life right now. Mm-hmm. And they're hyper fixating on it. Is the person routinely punctual, or are they living out of their car because they just lost their home? Are they going through a divorce and now transportation has changed and they got to be taking, kids across the train tracks every morning for school? When dealing with difficult people, pause, try to remember there's more than likely something informing that behavior. We always want to be mindful of sickness, not symptom. I want the thing behind the thing. So it's not just the email. We want to address that difficult email, that like, Megan's example, if you're just tuning in, somebody sends an email, 2 hours later, they send an email, crickets. 2 hours later, they send another kind of cutesy, snarky email, still crickets. How do I address that? Like we said, directly. Hey, it sounds like this is important. We acknowledge the specific behavior. We ask about what they need. We want to get clarity. And then we want to offer a solution moving forward. I can do this, but what it's going to take is X, Y, and Z. Then after the fact, do you have time to chat? That's when we address sickness, not symptom. We address the sickness. Hey, this has been something you and I have had happen a couple of times. And I have to be so incredibly honest with you. It's really distracting and it's disruptive to my day. I don't think that you intentionally mean to be that disruptive to my day, but I also don't know if you have a total awareness of what it is that's all on my plate right now. So I want to either A, get alignment on those things, or two, figure out what's going on with you. Because it seems like something's wrong, right? Like in that behavior, like help me understand what's going on. It seems like there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of stress there. So that's my thoughts on difficult people.
Well, I mean, you kind of covered a lot of bases with that too, of like conflict resolution and like general misunderstandings too, where it's like probability states, yeah, like a lot of those things within a difficult person are leading into those situations.
Wasn't
But
there another one we got that would be very similar to this?
yes.
What did we say?
So yeah, it's about how do you handle conflicts and how do you handle misunderstandings. So like, how have you clarified misunderstandings in the workplace? Because that's naturally going to happen where
Mhm.
you know, you're going to state something, and in your brain, I do this often, where it's like, oh, that made total sense to me, and I communicated very effectively what I wanted, and somebody got it, and they were just like, why would you say that? I'm like, oh my god, what did I say?
You've been at, well, you're going through Think Through to You right now.
Yep.
So you know this, but like I ask everyone who goes through Think Through to You this, and I say, raise your hand. I actually ask everybody who goes through any of my communication training this. So if you're watching this, one of the 9 people that are currently tuned in right now, there's a bunch of you that kind of tune in throughout your lunch break. So if you're watching this in the replay or not, and consider this question, have you ever spent the majority of a day, let's say a significant amount of time, hours, right? Kind of like stressed out, maybe a little bent out of shape, maybe a little pissed off, hurt even, after reading a message that someone has sent you? Everybody, all of us, because we're human, right? We should all have that experience. And then I ask people this: how many of you have sent a message to someone with the intention of making them feel upset or hurt or pissed off all day long? Like you wanted to ruin their day. By and large, most of us are like, no, I don't think I would do that intentionally. Like that's not the point. But I'm like, it's happened.
Mhm.
Like there's a 100% chance that someone has spent a really significant amount of time stressed out, hurt, confused, mad, sad, angry at something we've said. And so I just have to remind people, like when you talk about conflict, when we talk about misunderstandings, the reality is we're all in that boat. And this is where, again, some of that hurt versus harm stuff comes into play. Hurt is an outcome. We can, and we should acknowledge hurts. It is not a safe environment if you cannot acknowledge the outcome or the impact that is your hurt. I'm going to say that one more time. If you have a working environment where you don't have the ability or the relationships where you can acknowledge a hurt and not have somebody immediately defend it with their intent, that's not an environment that's safe. An environment that's safe doesn't mean that people don't get hurt emotionally or with communication, right? Those things are going to happen because we make mistakes. So what we can do, right? And so even you look at models for physical safety, companies that do construction or other similar things where there's high risk of physical danger, they put in a lot of checks and balances to make sure everyone's on the same page. And it's the same exact way with conflicts and misunderstandings. Let's see what Bex is up to. Clarity and alignment, right? Well beforehand. We all have to be on the same page. We all have to know what this means, what this doesn't mean. We have to navigate with that, navigate forward using that common baseline. As far as misunderstandings go, if you are the one that instigated the misunderstanding, take the L, own it, rephrase yourself, say, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. You can be right or you can be effective at the end of the day.
I was going to say, it's like, raise your hand if you've ever been personally victimized by yourself.
All of us.
I did that to my done self. I think one question that like I see come up often, and we did get asked too, is how do you effectively communicate between generations? So that's a big thing right now. We've got a lot of generations in the workforce, and everybody likes to be talked to in a different way. So how do you, as a leader, communicate effectively to your Gen Z employee to your millennial employee to your Gen X, your boomer.
Gen Zs. I got no idea.
Out of luck. Oh, Tone's got an answer.
No,
Tone's got
I'm just
something.
kidding. I'm
Oh.
not even Gen Z.
You're not Gen Z.
No, I was gonna say you're millennial, man.
You're
You're a baby
millennial, right?
Yeah,
You're on the-
just
you're on the
You're a
cusp.
baby millennial.
Just barely.
Yes, coming from an
Just
elder
barely.
millennial, you are the youngest of our group.
It's true.
Generational things that's always been an issue,
Mhm.
right? So there's been different generations interacting in the workforce since we've had a modern workforce. There used to be like kids, literal kids in factories. So like there's always been generational issues, right? Obviously, and thankfully, the workforce has changed a ton since then. That being said, we got on this kick back when we were first starting Think 3D. This was early, mid 2000 teens, 15, 16. And the question then was millennials, right? We were just getting into the workforce in large, which is weird
Millennials
because
are
I've
the
been in the
worst.
I've been in the workforce full time since 2008.
Yeah.
I don't know what you
I don't
guys
know
were
where all
talking
these
about. I don't know
people
where
be
all these
coming.
people were coming from, but I was in the workforce full time for the better part of a decade before a lot of my peers finished up school. That being said, they've always been there. So I'm going to answer it just like I would talking about millennials, because I do truly feel like it is applicable to any generational gap. Where did they come from? They didn't come from space. They didn't come from pods. They didn't sprout out of little things in the ground like Uruk-hai. Super deep cut reference. If you get that
Oof.
Lord of the Rings reference, please
Jeez.
drop me a comment below.
Loved
But
everything about that, Daniel.
Where did they come from? I mean it, and like I mean it in like a way. Like where did the Gen Z come from? We raised them.
Mhm.
Gen X millennial parents are raising Gen Z, right? Very late. What would that be? Boomer. Very late boomer parents, or very early. I mean, very young versions of that. Because what's a Gen Z? 90, 97?
I think it's 96 to like
96 to like 02, 03.
somewhere
Let's
around
get
there.
some data on this.
1997 to 2012.
Whoa, really?
That's a pretty big.
Wow, that is a big
Yeah.
gap. Okay, so yeah.
To the Googles.
So like intergenerationally, right? Like that's going to be a thing. There's going to be younger folks entering the workforce in different positions. They're like those entry level things, those interns you get, that part-time staff. They might be super young. They might be students still. They might be in high school, might be college students. One of the best things you can do for them is try to operate with some empathy and understanding of the way you looked at the world when you were their age.
Mm.
I have a very healthy grasp of how poorly equipped I was as a young person with certain things. Now, granted, I had a lot of advantages. I had a lot of opportunities. I had a lot of cool stuff. But if you knew me back then, you knew I was an absolute menace and just difficulties, right? Communication, anger, all that stuff. So just try to be empathetic towards what the kids are going through. That being said, they did not come from Mars. Someone raised them. They are the product of our upbringing, of our doing. Now, don't get me wrong. People love to point at things. It's social media. It's this. It's TikTok. It's that. And the reality is, if you have a young person in front of you, you have an opportunity to try and reach that person and work on a relationship with that employee, that team member, that intern, whatever it is, in order to make a positive impact on them. And so as far as the generational stuff goes, treat them like a human being. Speak directly, right? Communicate directly, seek commonality, seek points. And honestly, there's fun, goofy things that we can celebrate as differences. You guys have seen it as much as I have as far as social media goes. Stuff is cyclical, like trends, right? Like fashion, all that stuff, it comes back around. And like sometimes they're just discovering the world that existed before social media, but now they're just doing it through social media. They're discovering all this stuff on their own. So one of the coolest things we can do is one, empathy and understanding. Two, connect, right? Try to find a connect, try to find a relationship. The other thing, three, is like find their strengths. If you're wondering about specifically to the workplace, there's things that new folks coming out of school right now, and I know a lot of students or a lot of young people are choosing not to go the academic route, or maybe they're not jumping right into the workforce. They're doing gig economy. They're being creators full time, whether they're creating content on social platforms or they're actually like making stuff, art, music, products, whatever the case is. There's a ton of that going on. People are opening up like Etsy shops, all this stuff. They have incredible strengths. They have things they're really, really good at. I think they have some gaps, as every generation has, right? We also have some things, but find one of those things that you can double down on, get them active, get them involved, and appreciate their perspective and try to inform a little bit of why they might want to listen to you, right? You have to make a case for that. People aren't just going to listen to you just because you're older.
Dear goodness,
Just the reality.
no, they
It's just
are
not going to happen. And to demand that or to expect that is, in my opinion, somewhat problematic. Like, it should be like, you should listen to me because I have a good idea, or I've thought about this, or I've asked, can you listen to me on this and really consider what I'm trying to say? But again, those things don't just happen by way of a position. So understand you're dealing with real, living, breathing human beings. They're the product of either your upbringing or the upbringing of your peers. And so we have to deal with that. We have to square with that. Does that mean they're always easy to deal with, as far as, especially coming from somebody who's now rapidly aging up in my millennial age group? I'm so lost at times, and everyone jokes, they call me old man Dan because I'm a bit more of a boomer anyways, but I get lost, if not as much, if not more than the next guy. So I get it to a degree. But at the same time, I got a heart for him. So,
Well, Dan, I think that leads into a really good question of, when you are a younger leader
yeah,
leading an older generation, that's something I think that's really challenging. And a lot of people that are currently millennials, or basically a lot of millennials right now, are doing that. They're leading teams that have people that are older than them on that, and getting that respect, that clout, because it's the thing of, before it was always, the person that's been there the longest, the eldest, is the leader of things. How does somebody navigate that and work through that kind of conflict? That is not a question. That was just me generic.
Yeah,
I
no, that's a
I
good
have
question.
questions.
As soon as I figure out how to do that flawlessly, I'll write a book. I'll make a lot of money. You'll never see me again.
Okay, well,
But
great.
like,
In the interim, what do you got?
I think back on one of my first jobs as a legit director, like supervisor. This would have been more of like a multi-site. Yeah, so it would have been a director. I think the title was director. So I helped somebody that I knew at an organization that did residential care, so behavioral treatment for young people with disabilities and other issues affecting their life, whether that be injuries, criminal things like that, whatever the case is. So this is nonprofit work, residential behavioral support, very difficult work. I was good in emergencies. I had a couple of training certifications that helped with that. Had some medical training, had some combatives training, and was decent at, I was assertive. I was a young dude and I was assertive and I was confident. And a lot of the times externally, you look at those things and you're like, oh, you make a good leader. Reality is I'm 22, maybe. I think I was 22, maybe 20, maybe 23. So it's over a decade ago now. The reality is I went at that job, and almost every single person at that job that was a full-timer was at least double my age. Most of the people that I led were in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they were all incredible people. They had incredible hearts. They did this work. And you guys know, if you do nonprofit work, you're in the audience, you know how difficult that can be.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how sometimes draining it can be after doing it for 20, 30 years. Then you have some little knucklehead come in who's 22 or 23, acting like he knows better than you. And so that my first experiences with this question were informed by that. If you're a younger person leading people who are older than you, acknowledge the gap. There are things that someone has been doing, even if they've been in a role. And I look at folks in like marketing. I think about some of our folks we work with. We got a couple of young folks right now. I say young, they're probably similar to my age. So sorry. We got a couple of folks in our program right now that work at an agency. And I know for a fact they're dealing with people, whether it's other people that support the accounts they support, or they're leading a team of people who maybe this person's done design for 12 years. And now this young person is stepping into a leadership role. They're on the design team, right? And that's their leader. Especially in industries like that, whether it's marketing, tech, anything that changes rapidly. 20 years of experience as a welder, like there's things you're going to learn welding over for 20 years that you'll never be able to teach in an academy or a class, because it comes with the finesse and the understanding, and that the thousands of hours of reps done at it. Same thing with design, same thing with marketing. 10 years of doing that, especially how fast paced that stuff changes. You've got a wealth of knowledge and experience. If you are coming in as a leader whose age or experience level is vastly different from your team, acknowledge that gap and be like, hey, I'm not here because I know better. I'm here because I'm decent in front of people. I'm good at leading a team, and I know how to connect the dots. What I need from you guys is I need your best. I need your strengths. You guys know what to do. I'm going to be here to solve problems and get barriers out of your way. I work for you, not the other way around. And I think we get it backwards.
No.
So
Well,
I think
and
when you're
that's
a young
really
leader,
hard to admit too.
it sucks. It's hard.
As a person, who had to lead people that I had no concept of an idea of what a front desk staff ever did. But for some odd reason, they're like, Megan, you should do this. And I was like, that feels like a choice. That's a flex. That's a choice, my friends.
It's a choice, yeah.
But figuring that out and having to like humbly admit, I literally have no idea what it's like to do your job. I'm just here to be your cheerleader, to be your soundboard when something goes sideways and help you problem solve. Like that is a very hard thing to have to like take a knee on, where you're just like, I literally don't know
Yeah.
what your day is like, but I will empathize the crap out of it and try to do the best that I can to just be there
I'm
for
here
you
for you.
when something goes sideways. Like that is hard. It is not fun to be in.
Yep.
And it sometimes can go one or two ways with people too, because some people will take that then as like, oh, this weakness.
No.
And some people are like, hey, cool. Thank you for admitting that you don't have all the answers.
Yep. And that's honestly like that's going to take some confidence, some subtlety, some nuance, some intention. What that looks like is being able to have difficult conversations. And when I say difficult, I don't just mean critical. I don't just mean feedback. I mean like it makes me nervous, or it's an emotional conversation. Those are what I mean by difficult conversations. Can you have those? Are you comfortable having those? And when I say comfortable having them, no one really enjoys them. I kind of do to a degree, but it's because I've done it a lot.
And you're a special beast, Daniel.
I'm a little different. I'm built a little different. That being said, like, there's no silver bullet that makes difficult conversations easy. There's not. Empathy, curiosity get you at least halfway. Understanding I might be wrong on this, but at the same time, be confident. Somebody challenges you and your leadership and it seems like they're challenging it from a personal level. Inquire within, right? Hey, it seems like you're coming for me a little bit, and I'm not quite sure where that energy comes from. Yeah. I just got here, right? Like I said, in our first all hands or our first meeting or our first whatever, I told you my position on leadership. I told you my perspective. This thing you said multiple times, or this thing you did, has informed me that you might have an issue with the way that I lead. Help me understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Get to the bottom of it, right? If there's going to be people that push back on you, if there's people that want to try to take advantage of that as a weakness, then we're going to have a conversation about some of that malintent. Why are we playing these games at the end of the day when you have somebody who's willing to serve, willing to lead, willing to support you right in front of you, willing to do the thing? But there's no easy answer to leading people that are older than you or more experienced than you. The only thing you can do in that moment is lean into it. Say, I'm in this position because I'm really good at these things. Understand why you're there. Also, young people, when you get into leadership positions, they wouldn't have hired you if they didn't think you could do it.
Yep.
So I get imposter syndrome more than most. There's a lot of gray hair on the top of my head that was caused by worry, that was self-inflicted worry, and it will continue to get worse. So I resonate with that from a very real level. That being said, they wouldn't hire you expecting you to fail. That just doesn't make sense. So when you have those thoughts, those dialogues, and I'm not talking about during the workday, I'm talking about on your commute home, when you're laying in bed at midnight on a Tuesday, the day before a big meeting, and you're looking at the ceiling and you're like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. You're a fraud. You're a fake. You're a liar. You're not good at anything. All those voices, that's not you. That's somebody else that put that negativity there. The company or the team or the organization or whatever, they would not have hired you if there was questions about your ability to do the job. Does that mean it's going to be easy? Does that mean you're ready to do it successfully 100% right now? No, you probably have some growing to do, just like we all do. But the reality is, if I'm a business leader, I'm not going to put Megan on my team if I don't think Megan can't make the play.
I can make the play, Dan.
She can make the play, right? So like, that's just something to keep in mind, just something to remember.
I think, Dan, way to close this out is one other thing that's fairly topical with people is remote teams. How do you keep your remote team members engaged and informed? And just how do you work with that? I mean, especially in a post-COVID world, we have a lot of businesses trying to fluctuate people back into their office spaces.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are still pushing against that because they work better. How does one navigate that? And I think this is probably a good one to end our day on.
Because you know that I get lengthy. You know that I get wordy. I think the people appreciate it. I hope so.
With your smooth jazz voice.
It's not intentional. It's just how I talk. If there's not a good reason that you can articulate from a performance standpoint or from a business impact standpoint that people should be working from an office full time, if that's going to cause actual like more difficulty for them, take that into consideration. Forcing people back into an 8 to 5 at an office with a commute and stuff like that might not be ideal. Should there be there is a point of diminishing returns, and let's all be incredibly honest right now. In the comfort of your home, if you are at home or your cubicle or your car, wherever you're tuning in from, let's be honest. That 8 a.m. meeting, you shuffle on over and find the cleanest, closest pair of pants, maybe, and you shuffle on over to your desk at 7:58. And that's how a lot of us work from home. Let's just be incredibly honest. We got laundry going.
Mhm.
We got dishes going. We got food on the stove. We're bopping around, listening to our murder mystery podcast, whatever the case is,
Ooh, yeah.
and we're working from home. And we like that because it's different. I just want all of us to acknowledge why we like it. We like the flexibility. We like the being close to home. For a lot of folks, there's very real reasons why that's valuable. Childcare is super expensive. So if I can be in a position where my folks can lessen the impact, the financial impact of childcare and transportation, I'm going to support that 100%. All of that's table stakes. My opinion on managing remote teams is go to where people are at, using the platforms that they use the most. And we want to avoid meeting just for redundancy, but we want to meet to connect as often as the nature of our work would require. So I'm not a big fan of meeting for meeting's sake. In fact, you can look at organizations and the number of meetings that they have during the week versus certain things like engagement. There's some interesting data. We'll find it. We'll share it at some point. I'm not going to misquote it, but there is a correlation between an overabundance of meetings and like lack of productivity, lack of engagement, lack of honestly, even looking at market share, like for some of these bigger corporations. So try to look at your meetings with a truly like an intentional scope. I think connect as often as possible, create time for camaraderie. Insofar as you're able, we should be communicating using tools like audio and video calls, mainly because when we're managing people remotely and we're using Teams, we're using Slack, we're using, God forbid, WebEx. Shout out to Scott Wetherill if he's listening. If we're using a platform like that, written communication, especially short form, is easy to get misinterpreted. So it depends on the culture of your business, the culture of your team. If you want to manage a remote team and you manage them remotely, you set the expectations up front. Hey guys, we're a talkative team. We chatter a lot because this is important work. There's a lot of nuances. So our expectation is if you said that you were online and you're working and available and I don't see you on D&D or away, that's do not disturb, not Dungeons and Dragons. If I don't see you on that.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah, I knew somebody was going to hit me in the comments. If I don't see you on that, I'm going to call you. I'm going to video call you and set those parameters up front. Here's how we like to communicate, in what manner and what cadence and for what. We have that. We've built that for clients. We use chat for this, video for this, Teams for this, email for this, phone calls for this. So let people know how you want them to communicate and when. Set those communication standards and expectations up early and often. The next thing you can do is if you're leading that to me, people just check in. Have fun with it. Use things to your advantage. If you got a good connection with your team, if people are well-intended, you can joke around. Send a GIF, send an emoji, send whatever, have a good time. Use the tools that you have. My biggest thing, if there's ever a disconnect between the expectations of the team or the leader and reality, that's where we really get into problems, right? I just say that. Set those expectations on how you want us to communicate, when, how often, and make that a tone. Like that's the tone for the environment. For our team, we communicate this way. Other teams are going to be much more formal. People are going to want to keep their heads down. So be sensitive to that. Be sensitive to the type of work you're doing. If you're working in an environment where you've got dev people, and like my dev guys need to be focused on building. They're writing code, they're building, they're doing tables, they're doing a thing. My account people, my account execs, my team people, they're my people, and they might be wanting to go back and forth between the customer and the dev team all the time during the day. That might be really disruptive to these guys. So you got to be mindful of that. What type of work are we doing, right? What are the expectations we need? So setting those things up front, finding time to connect, finding time to collaborate. Also, if you're an employer, I just got to say this before I go. I know we're going a little bit long, but whatever. Output, not input. Okay. Working with remote people, I need to hold them accountable to output, not input. I don't care if you're punching every single time card during the week to a degree, and that's my opinion. But when we're talking about the remote work, while people aren't working, they're sitting on Netflix. I don't know, man. I'm not going to get into the manner of policing people. I'm not. If you don't have a strong enough tie to the mission, vision, values, expectations, or belief in what it is that you're actually freaking doing to where you think that's a problem, you have bigger problems. You have bigger fish to fry. Some of my bigger employers, global corporations, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. You have bigger fish to fry if that's really what we're at. If you have the luxury of being a medium to small business or a smaller team where you have a little bit more closer tie to some of those things, Focus on output, not input. If the work isn't structured in a way, or the reporting isn't structured in a way, or the processes aren't structured in a way where I can tell is the work getting done when it needs to get done, in the manner that it needs to get done, and to the quality that it needs to get done. It's not about the time they're putting in, it's about what they're able to produce. Because there's certain weeks they might put in 50, 60 hours. There's other weeks where, hey man, I got it all done in 36. So I'm going to go hit the links on Friday afternoon. I'm going to go enjoy a course. For me, I go to the range. For me, I go do whatever. Right. But I might go do that on a Friday afternoon if I'm sitting with all my stuff done. So I'd take those things into consideration leading a remote team. It's not easy because now you're taking the proximity out of it. So you have to lead on trust. You have to lead on clarity of expectations, and you have to communicate. Sound good?
Deal.
All right.
Bet.
I don't know, folks. Watch this back. Watch the playback. Like I said, we're not gurus. This is just our. I shouldn't say our. I'm not going to speak for everybody. This is just Dan's take on a few of these things after having been exposed to a lot of different organizations and teams, and a lot of lived experience. I should say, not the end all. Like there's more experience to come, I'm sure, and I might change my mind on stuff in 10 years, 20 years. You never know. But that's just my experience so far, my opinion so far. We hope you find these somewhat valuable. We have a good time doing it. It's just good for us to get together and share, I think, our opinion on things in a little bit more of like a longer format. And so we're going to continue to evolve this. Like I said, we're going to get Tone involved. Megan's going to be more involved. We're going to get you guys more involved too as we continue to do this. This is only the second one that I've done. So look for more. We got another one coming up next month. Bring your Halloween costume. It's on Wednesday, October 30th. Speaking of, Megan, anything else we should shamelessly plug while we have them?
Well, we have this very large event coming up that we like to call Culture Con. Excuse me, my
Yep.
God, I don't even know how to pronounce it.
We have too many culture things. Culture
We have a lot of
Cove,
culture.
Culture Con,
Combat
Culture. Yep.
Oh boy.
October 29th, Culture Con Sioux Falls. If you have not picked up a table, I would highly recommend it. This year's theme is Trust the Process. And what we're going to be talking about is people in various stages of life, various professional backgrounds, personal backgrounds, and either their journey as they've already had to trust the process at some point in their life, or how are they currently trusting the process. We're going to break down work stuff, some community development, some personal things, all sorts of good stuff. So it's a full day conference, honestly pretty affordable. It's like $100. Come out, get a day full of content, training. We'll feed you. There's a great social afterwards. You'll get some free swag.
Get to
And
listen to me speak.
Yeah, you
Get
get to listen to
Antonio speak.
Tone.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, humble opinion on the total atmosphere of the event. It's going to be great.
It's gonna be good. We throw on
Just
it.
saying.
We do throw a good event.
Stylistically.
Yep.
Humble brag.
Yep. So if you've got some time on October 29th, is a Tuesday. Wednesday, October 30th is our next lunch and learn or open gym, that we're doing here. Otherwise, folks, go check us out on the socials. Honestly, like YouTube for us is a big one. Go subscribe.
Mhm.
We're putting out a lot of content, like a lot of
So much
shorts, a
content.
lot of reels, a lot of stuff that kind of echoes what we talk about here. If you're looking for some ideas or some, I would even say some confirmation, some support,
Yep.
some motivation, whatever the case is, go
Some
over
positivity
to
on the internet,
yep,
too.
some positivity on the internet.
Good vibes.
So go to Do Work Better on YouTube. Go subscribe to our channel so you can see some of those shorts, those things we post up. Otherwise, if you're interested in any way, shape, or form, like having a sit down about talking about this in a real way for what it looks like for your team specifically. How do we communicate better? Do you want to take half a day, bring your team in and say, hey, let's work through some communication stuff. Let's get some stuff out and on the table. Let's get on the whiteboards. Let's ideate and let's plan. Hit us up. We're more than happy to make that happen. We're more than happy to facilitate that. I think that we've got a very no frills, no kind of gimmick approach. It's very real. It's founded in, I think, a very realistic place. So we'd be happy to work with you and your teams and do whatever we can to try to support you guys in your efforts at communicating better.
Boom.
That's all we got. You guys have an incredible day. Have an incredible rest of your week. We will see you again in a number of weeks. Stay tuned and go make it a great day.